Revenge with Karen. Do we really need her in the room? That's what one of the execs whispered. Not even whispered, mumbled like I wasn't sitting 3 chairs away, sipping burnt Keurig and highlighting a compliance addendum that would later save their asses. It wasn't the first time. Hell, it wasn't even the fifth. But something about that particular Tuesday hit different. Maybe it was the way my pen froze mid-sentence. Or the way the CFO chuckled like he'd just farted out an IPO. They forgot who built the damn house. I wasn't some shiny hire from a founder's fantasy football league. I was Margaret Ann Green, and for 11 years, I was the invisible spine of that firm. I didn't ask for glory. I didn't do vision boards. I did contracts. I negotiated margins and clawbacks and incentive ladders while they drank espresso from cups smaller than their ethics, handed out bonuses for team synergy, while I was the one untangling billion-dollar red lines over holiday weekends with a sinus infection and a glass of stale Pinot. But I wasn't bitter. Not really. You can't be bitter when you know you're the reason the lights stay on. You just smile while someone else gets the trophy for the fire you put out. That was my role, the ghost in the spreadsheet, the phantom signature beneath the trust clause, steady hand behind the $250 million deal that made our firm look bigger than it really was. I remember sitting in that deal review call last spring, watching the senior partners squirm while the client grilled us on contingency planning. They panicked. I smiled and pulled up the clause I wrote. Section 14B, Key Person Trigger. I watched their faces morph from doubt to relief in real time, like I'd just cast a spell. No one said thank you, just ended the call early and booked golf. So no, I wasn't surprised when I wasn't invited to the strategic offsite in Aspen. I wasn't shocked when my name was left off the press release about the record-setting client win. And I certainly wasn't waiting for anyone to notice I was quietly mentoring every damn associate on that floor while rewriting their broken onboarding templates in my free time. I wasn't flashy. I was structural. By the way, I have your attention, quick thing. If you've ever been passed over, spoken over, or had your work claimed by someone who couldn't spell EBITDA if it hit them in the face, tap that subscribe and like. It helps the team more than you know, and maybe, just maybe, it'll make stories like this keep showing up in your feed. Anyway, the culture shifted when Logan walked in. New CEO, slick suit, 2 white teeth, kind of guy who calls people rock stars and fires half of them before lunch. He strutted through the office like a rooster, hopped up on LinkedIn buzzwords, declaring we were going to modernize our approach and streamline leadership. I watched the partners nod like bobbleheads at a used car lot. One of them, Greg, who once CC'd a client on an internal email calling them delusional toddlers, suddenly started using the word synergy like it cured cancer. Logan wanted to trim the fat. I knew I was on the menu when he asked for a copy of the deal Bible and didn't look me in the eye. I handed it over. 8 binders, color-coded, indexed, annotated. He looked at them like I'd brought him a box of expired Hot Pockets. Didn't say thanks. Just grunted and passed it to his assistant, who dropped it. The disrespect was surgical, but I didn't flinch. I'd seen men like Logan before. They climb fast, talk loud, mistake speed for competence. I've buried 5 Logans in my career. They all think they're wolves until the sheep stop following. I kept my head down, kept mentoring the kids, kept fixing the billing system no one understood but me. I even corrected a fatal error in a subclause 2 hours before the contract was signed. Didn't even tell anyone, and slowly I noticed something. I wasn't just invisible, I was being erased. My name came off the calendar invites, then off the email threads, then off the org chart. And still, I showed up. I kept showing up, because I knew something they didn't. They thought the deal made me, but I made the deal. And every clause they skimmed over with their MBA-glazed eyes, I wrote those in blood. First day Logan shows up. He's wearing a blazer so tight you could see the shape of his ambition. Walks into the Monday morning ops meeting like he's auditioning for a reboot of Suits, except in this version. Harvey Specter got his JD from a YouTube ad. He doesn't sit, he perches. Like a man who thinks sitting is for people without exit strategies. And right out the gate, he starts with that smug half-smile you only learn at Ivy League clubs where they teach you how to fire someone with eye contact. He didn't ask about the client portfolio. Didn't ask who handled compliance during the Q3 panic. Didn't even fake interest in the staff. He just said, need to get lean and agile. Think less legacy operator, more strategic disruptor. Then he winked, winked at a room full of people who'd kept this place from imploding every quarter since 2012. That was the beginning of the end. By Friday, a calendar invite popped up on my screen. Knowledge Transfer Session External Ops Alignment. Hosted by a firm of consultants I'd never heard of, fresh out of grad school, armed with slide decks, buzzwords, and all the strategic insight of a melted candle. I walked in and realized immediately I was the exhibit, not the expert. They wanted me to pour 11 years of institutional knowledge into these interns with business cards. Teach them how I negotiated the rollback clause in the $250M deal. Show them how I built a fallback model to cover if the supplier defaulted. Walk them through the goodwill mitigation framework I handcrafted during a holiday layoff. I taught them, sure. I also accidentally left out the part where the client required real-time reporting triggers for budget escalations, the same triggers the consultants forgot to configure later. Oops. The week after that, Logan called me into the glass box of shame, his office. He was all smiles, like a dentist delivering bad news with Novocaine. Sat on the edge of his desk, hands steepled like a discount guru. Said something like, "Margaret, your contributions have been foundational, but we're heading in a new direction. One that requires fresh energy. Adaptive thinkers." I didn't blink. He slid a folder across the desk. Severance packet, NDA, legalese tied in a pink bow. Effective immediately, he said, like it was the weather. That's when Greg, same guy who used to ask me to double-check the numbers because you're better at that spreadsheet stuff, walked by and said with a smirk, "Tough market out there, huh? No company will hire you now. Not at your level. No rage, no yelling." I just picked up the packet, stood up and said, "Greg, I once spent 2 weekends fixing your bonus miscalculation. You're welcome." Then I walked out. No big scene. No HR tantrum. No Karen moment. I boxed my desk in silence. Just 3 things. My mug that said I run on caffeine and contracts, a little bonsai tree I'd been trying to keep alive since 2017, and a leather notebook, the original draft of the deal clauses. The good stuff, my stuff. The version before legal watered it down. A junior analyst tried to hug me near the elevator. I stepped back and said, "You're going to do great. Keep your inbox clean and your clauses cleaner." Press the button. Elevator opened. Security didn't say a word, not even a nod. Badge deactivated before I hit the parking garage, and just like that, I was gone. Logan probably thought he'd buried me in a Friday afternoon termination slot, like some admin footnote. But he didn't know what he'd just done. He didn't read what I wrote, and that was his first mistake. I carried the banker's box like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It barely held more than a coffee mug, 3 dried-out Sharpies, and the ghost of my self-respect. You'd think after 11 years there'd be a parade, a card. Hell, maybe a laminated certificate of thanks for not letting us drown. But no, just silence. That corporate, humming, fluorescent silence where everything smells faintly of old printer toner and broken promises. The goodbye email, never sent. What was I supposed to write? Thanks for firing me politely after bleeding me dry for over a decade. Nah, I wasn't going to be that woman. The one who attaches a headshot and drops a LinkedIn link like this was some networking mixer. They wanted me gone, so I vanished. I wrapped the bonsai tree in paper towels and shoved it gently between 2 folders, one labeled Client Compliance Framework and the other simply Clauses Originals. That was it. My legacy in 8.5x11, forest of footnotes and deal terms nobody ever bothered to read until the house was on fire. One by one, I pulled the pins from the corkboard above my desk. Client quotes, a printout of that email where the manufacturer called me their corporate compass, a comic strip someone gave me in 2016 about lawyers drowning in fine print. I didn't cry, not because I wasn't sad, but because it was too quiet for grief. I didn't want to give them that sound. I walked the hallway like a ghost no one could see. People peeked up over their monitors, gave those awkward nods like they were watching a retirement they hadn't RSVP'd for. No one spoke. No one moved, and that made sense. Logan had installed a new culture, one where empathy was seen as inefficiency. The ones who used to laugh at my terrible microwave popcorn always left first. Then came Mia, junior analyst, barely 25, used to shadow me during those monster client calls where the stakes were so high you could feel the heat through the speakerphone. She was sweet, naive, sharp in the way fresh blades are, full of potential but still unused to blood. She rushed up with this wet look in her eyes and said, "Margaret, you were the reason and I just held up my hand. Not harsh, Just final. Don't, I said. Keep your distance from the fire. They're still looking for someone to blame. She nodded, stiff and wide-eyed, like a kid who just saw the stove light up. Then the badge died. One step past the elevator threshold, and the sensor blinked red like I'd stolen office secrets, which I hadn't, not technically. Everything I took, I created, from scratch, from late nights, from missed holidays and client panic attacks at midnight. You don't steal what you are. The security guard, Jay, I think, one who used to hold the door when I came in early every Monday with 2 coffees and a migraine, didn't even make eye contact, just stared at his phone like I was already deleted from the system. In a way, I was. Elevator doors closed. No music, just my own breath echoing in the tin box. When I stepped outside, the air hit different. Colder, like the building had been sealing me in this whole time, and now it had exhaled me into the world. Sky looked too clean for what had just happened. A pigeon landed on the hood of my car, stared at me like even it knew I'd been screwed. I sat in the driver's seat, engine off, holding the steering wheel like it was going to bite me. I thought about calling someone, an old colleague, my sister, maybe even the client. But I didn't. I just sat there, letting the silence fill in all the places where my title used to live. Know that moment when something breaks inside you, but not in a dramatic, glass-shattering way, more like a hairline fracture you won't notice until weeks later, when it finally splits and you drop your keys and cry in a grocery store parking lot. Yeah, that was me. Except I wasn't broken. I was processing. And somewhere, deep in the dusty crawl space of my brain, a door creaked open. One I hadn't touched since I first pitched the contingency clause, key person clause, the one nobody had read but everyone had signed. And just like that, I remembered I hadn't left empty-handed. They thought they'd buried me. They forgot I planted mines. The sun wasn't even up yet when the letter landed. Legal got it first, slipped into the general counsel's inbox with a subject line that looked boring enough to ignore. Notice of termination rights urgent. No caps, no red exclamation mark. Just boring, beige corporate formatting. But what was inside? That was the kind of bomb that doesn't tick. It just waits. GC, his name's Harold, 40 years in the business, a man who irons his khakis and drinks decaf because adrenaline is a liability, opened it while microwaving day-old oatmeal in the break room. The first sentence didn't even register. It was the third line that stopped him cold. Per Section 14B of Agreement #8721CTR001, this letter serves as formal notification of the client's right to terminate immediately upon involuntary removal of named key person. M. A. Green. He stared at it. Read it again. Dropped his spoon in the oatmeal. 10 minutes later, he was in the conference room with the blinds half drawn, hair still sticking up on one side, thumbing through the firm's original hard copy of the deal. No PDF. No sanitized contract portal version. The version, paper, ink, blue signatures, and one clause on page 42 that nobody remembered writing because I had written it. He called Logan, got voicemail. Called the CFO, got voicemail. Finally, he called the EA, Rachel, the one who schedules things like CEO thought share syncs, and barked, get everyone. Now. No agenda. Just get them in the damn room. By 7:45 a.m., the executive boardroom looked like a funeral with donuts. Nobody knew why they were there. Greg wandered in, still chewing his kwasa, smirking like he'd just shorted a stock that tanked. Logan arrived last, of course, fashionably ruffled and smelling like dry shampoo and tequila logic. He dropped into the head chair like a sitcom character entering the wrong plot. Harold didn't waste time. He pulled a crinkled letter from his folder and read it aloud, his voice flat but getting tighter with every word. When he said named key person, M. A. Green, the room finally woke up. There was a pause, the kind that has weight. A silence you could pour over cereal. Wait, what clause is this? Logan said, half laughing like this was some legal Mad Libs. Section 14B, Harold replied, flipping the contract around and pushing it across the table like a poker hand nobody wanted to play. Page 42, bottom half. Greg leaned over, squinted, read, swallowed. This can't be enforceable, he muttered, suddenly not so smug. I mean, we've replaced staff before. Hell, we fired 3 senior analysts last year. Harold tapped the page. Those weren't named. This one is. See the wording, key person M. A. Green, non-substitutable without written client approval. That's not vague. That's ironclad. Logan blinked like someone had just said his Tinder profile was inaccurate. Who the hell approved this? No one answered. Because the truth was, Nobody remembered the clause, because they'd never read the fine print, because when the deal was on fire, I'd written the extinguisher. They just signed wherever the flags told them to, had redlined the original draft during a Sunday rainstorm, while Logan was still building thought leadership on Instagram. And now, the client was pulling the pin. We have lost confidence in your firm's ability to uphold the original spirit and structure of the agreement, specifically due to the unauthorized termination of our protected key person. As such, we are initiating the contract's early exit clause, effective immediately, unless otherwise addressed to our satisfaction. That was their message, and satisfaction, it had my initials on it. Logan tried to brush it off. Look, it's one clause, we spin it, we say she retired or something. Offer them new talent, fresh leadership. Harold just stared at him. Logan, this isn't spin, this is breach. We triggered their kill switch. Greg finally said it out loud. We fired the one person they said not to. The room went quiet again, only now it was different. Not confusion, not surprise. Fear, because now it wasn't about me. It was about the $250 million at stake, about investor calls, about brand damage, about one clause that no one thought mattered until it did. And back in my apartment, with a fresh cup of coffee and my inbox freshly unsubscribed from company alerts, I read the forwarded termination notice from the client's team and smiled. Because they weren't just about to lose a deal, or about to learn exactly what it feels like to ignore the fine print. Harold came back into the boardroom like a man carrying a corpse. Not fast, not slow, just heavy, like every step was permission to let gravity take over. In his hands, a battered red folder with a tab that read CTR 001 exec copy signed. This wasn't some digital scan. This was the holy grail, blue ink, margins smudged with human fingerprints. Real paper, the kind that curls over time and smells faintly like toner and fear. He laid it down like evidence in a murder trial. No one moved. Logan tried to play casual, leaned back, arms crossed like he was about to get talked through a text slide deck. Let's get on with it then, he said, like this was beneath him. Harold didn't respond. Just opened the contract, turned past the summary pages, past the boilerplate, past the M and a gloss, till he hit the spot that now had everyone's blood pressure playing jump rope. Page 42. He smoothed the sheet, adjusted his reading glasses, and then he read. In the event of termination, removal, or reassignment of the individual herein, referred to as the key person, defined below, the client reserves the right to void the agreement in its entirety, effective immediately, without penalty, refund, or further obligation. He paused, just long enough for the panic to leak into the room like gas. Then read the next line. Key person M.A. Green, non-substitutable without written client approval. You could feel the oxygen get sucked out of the room. Logan's smile twitched, faltered, vanished. His left hand gripped the edge of the table like it might fall out from under him. Across from him, Greg stared at the ceiling like it might offer a way out. Rachel, the E, started tapping her nails on her tablet in tiny Morse code panic. Harold didn't blink. They've already invoked it. What do you mean? Logan's voice cracked just enough to notice. I mean, Harold said, flipping to the last page where the client's signatures lived, they've read this more carefully than we have, and they've already exercised their right to terminate. Greg cleared his throat, trying to salvage some ground. We can negotiate. Offer them someone else. I mean, got talent? Harold tapped the line again. Non-substitutable. This isn't soft language. This is contractually explicit. There's no backdoor, no workaround. The client knew exactly what they were doing when they signed this. Logan squinted at the page like maybe he could unread it. Who even drafted this? Who put that clause in? And that's when Harold, the man who once said emotions were a liability, looked at him dead in the eye and said, Margaret did. Silence. Tonic, bone-deep silence. She wrote the original client defense matrix. Harold continued, quieter now. Negotiated terms when the client demanded performance-based safeguards. She created this clause on their suggestion, back when leadership was too busy planning the rebrand launch party. Logan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Why wasn't this flagged? Harold didn't bother hiding the condescension, because it was in her version she pushed for, the one we accepted because it closed the deal. Then he dropped the final nail in the coffin. She was protecting the client from us. That's when the sweat started, not a lot, just enough to gather at the collar of Logan's $900 shirt. His confidence curdled right in front of us, because now the room understood. Margaret hadn't been some replaceable operations mule. She had been the one person the client trusted more than the brand, more than the partners, more than the firm, and they fired her like she was a spreadsheet with legs. No one said anything for a long time. Greg picked a donut like it might offer salvation. Rachel quietly deleted 3 meetings off the calendar, and Harold closed the contract like a priest shutting a casket. She's not just a clause, he said. She's the damn cornerstone. Logan stood up, paced, muttered something about damage control, but there was no spin here, no pivot deck. The ink had dried years ago. They'd ignored the foundation, and now the building was shaking. Back at my apartment, the same red folder sat open on my coffee table. The original draft, my handwriting in the margins. One note circled twice. Client confidence must outlast executive turnover. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, smiled at the clause, and whispered, "Page 42, baby. Turns out the fine print does matter. You're the one who writes it." It was 6 months before the ink dried, before the press release, before Logan, before the idiotic champagne toasts that made it sound like the $250 million deal fell from the sky like golden snow. 6 months earlier, I was sitting in a glassed-in conference room across from their VP of Risk, a woman named Alina who looked like she trusted exactly no one and had the contract scars to prove it. Pushed the binder aside, didn't even open it, just stared at me and said, "Tell me why we should trust you." Not the firm, not the logo, not the smiling sharks in the corner offices. Me, so I told her. I told her about the way I rewrote our entire supplier liability model after a freight collapse in 2019. I told her how I'd walked a previous client through a lawsuit minefield while half the exec team hid behind out-of-office replies. I told her I didn't care about glory, didn't care about my name on the door. I cared about the work, about systems that didn't collapse under pressure, about clients who didn't have to panic when someone upstairs got a new strategic vision. Alina didn't smile, just tapped her pen twice and asked, "And what happens when they move you out? Because they will. They always do." I didn't flinch. Just leaned in and said, "Then let's make sure they can't." She tilted her head. That's when I suggested the clause. Section 14B wasn't some happy accident. It wasn't a footnote. It was surgery. I wrote it in the margins first, then crafted a clause so precise it could slice the deal open if mishandled. I built it not to protect me, but them, the client, the only people who'd ever looked me in the eye and asked the right question. Named key person, I'd said, sliding the draft across the table. Can't be reassigned, removed, or terminated without your written consent. If I'm gone, you walk. No penalties, no strings, just clean exit. She read it twice. Then said they're never going to notice this. Probably not, I said, until they do something stupid. The next day, their legal signed off. Not a single revision. Their CEO even called it an elegant parachute. My firm, they didn't blink. Partners were too busy hunting down headline language and arguing over which word sounded more impressive than synergy. Nobody asked why I requested physical copies of the final version. Nobody noticed I filed one in my personal archive, in a fireproof box under a folder labeled "If They Ever Forget." And oh boy, did they forget. The minute Logan walked in with his Vineyard Vines grin and his thirst for optimization, I knew the countdown had started. Didn't even ask who negotiated the clause library. Just assumed the deals were plug-and-play, like contract work was IKEA furniture, and not one wrong screw from collapse. Every exec that came after the ink dried, forgot. Every analyst who rode my work into a promotion, forgot. The firm, the board, the ones who shook my hand with their mouths and stabbed my value with their eyes, they all forgot. But Alina didn't. I knew she wouldn't, because exactly 12 hours after my badge went dead, I got a message from her personal number. Subject, you were right. And below it, a PDF copy of the clause, highlighted, time-stamped, already sent to their legal team. No emotion, no commentary. Just the one thing I'd written years earlier that suddenly had more weight than every quarterly report they'd fluffed up with jargon. The trigger had been pulled, not in anger, not out of spite, just as planned. That's the thing about safeguards. They're quiet until they're not. You write them in silence, alone, maybe a little tired, maybe a little cynical. You write them knowing you won't get credit, knowing some haircut in a blazer will get the praise, knowing someone like Logan will one day stroll in thinking the castle runs itself. But you do it anyway, because someone has to remember what the rest of them forget. That nothing is bulletproof unless you build it that way. When I saw the client letter hit their inbox, polite, precise, surgical, I didn't feel proud. I felt prepared. Alina had warned me. I had warned her. Now the clause would do the talking. The voicemail came in at 6:13 a.m., timestamped like a legal document, crisp, cold, and clear. No pleasantries, no runaround. Just Alina's voice, the same voice that once asked me point blank if my firm could be trusted not to screw her company over. Now, it didn't sound uncertain. She sounded ready. Margaret, we'd like to work directly with you now. Same deliverables, our terms, your timeline. Let us know what you need to make it official. Click. No second message. No hope you're well fluff. Just the kind of direct communication that tells you the decision was already made hours ago, probably in a room with people wearing expensive watches and very serious faces. People who didn't want explanations, wanted solutions. And I was the solution. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, same one I'd eaten sad desk salads at during pandemic hell, staring at the blinking voicemail light on my phone like it was a portal. Not to glory, not to revenge, to escape. I called back an hour later, used my calmest, driest voice. I assume the contract will name me as sole point of contact. Alina didn't miss a beat. Absolutely. And my rate, $275 an hour. Flat. No cap. No clawbacks. Remote, flexible, 6-month retainer. We'll wire the signing bonus this week. It wasn't even a negotiation. It was a recognition. Meanwhile, back at the firm, my old firm, the one that forgot me faster than an unpaid intern, chaos. I didn't need an inside mole. Word leaked like water through drywall. Greg had tried calling the client twice, stonewalled by someone in legal who wouldn't even confirm receipt of his emails. Rachel was seen pacing outside Logan's office, white as a filing cabinet, muttering something about unrecoverable reputational damage. And Logan, word was he tried to charm Alina directly, sent a message that began with "Let's reset the table and rebuild trust." She responded with 2 words, clause enforced. That's the difference between power and proximity. They were near the client. I was needed by the client. I didn't send gloating texts, didn't post vague victories on LinkedIn. No on to the next adventure humblebrag. No revenge playlist. Just a PDF proposal, signed and timestamped, and a silence that spoke louder than any boardroom apology. That afternoon, I opened the email from their procurement officer. Short and sweet. Subject, direct contract Margaret A. Green attached. Scope of work MSA payment schedule, and below that, our legal has advised that we make no further use of the original firm's infrastructure. You will be provided access to all necessary materials. Thank you for maintaining the integrity of this process. Maintaining the integrity. I laughed when I read that, because they weren't just hiring me, they were cutting the cord from the people who thought my exit was a footnote. That night, Logan finally called me. Locked number, I answered out of morbid curiosity. Margaret, he said, with that voice people use when they realize the dog they kicked now owns the building. We may have overcorrected. I'd love to explore a path forward that brings you back in, maybe as an executive consultant. You'd have full latitude. I let the silence grow long enough for him to start squirming. Then I said, Logan, do I sound unemployed to you? He started to respond. I hung up. No malice, no performance. Just a quiet return to the life I was owed long before someone in a starched shirt decided I was legacy baggage. I wasn't legacy. I was leverage. And now, I wasn't just back. I was untouchable. The bluff came at 10:04 a.m. on a Tuesday, during what was supposed to be a rebuilding dialogue, corporate speak for "let's pretend this isn't on fire." Logan, wearing a jacket he clearly hadn't earned and confidence that didn't belong to him, sat on a Zoom call across from Alina and her legal team with the kind of grin people use when they think charm can outmaneuver consequence. He opened with a friendly chuckle, like this was all just a little misunderstanding between adults. We totally respect the importance of continuity, he said, like he'd just Googled the term that morning. And while Margaret's departure was part of a broader streamlining strategy, fully prepared to assign a senior partner to manage the relationship. One of our best, he smiled. Alina didn't, she didn't even blink. Instead, the client's general counsel, a quiet guy named Brian who once stared down a Federal Trade Commission rep without flinching, leaned forward, adjusted his glasses, and spoke with the clarity of a guillotine. This contract, he said slowly, was person-dependent. That isn't just language, it's binding structure. Didn't just remove a staff member. You removed the named assurance that anchored the client's confidence. You voided your own guarantee. The silence on Logan's end was instant, heavy. You could hear his Adam's apple struggle not to move. Greg, who'd been brought in to support communication, immediately tried to salvage things. I mean, sure, the clause exists, but practically, Brian cut in. You signed it. Greg looked like a man realizing he'd walked into a courtroom wearing flip-flops. Back in the boardroom, things got worse. The Zoom hadn't even ended when the internal fallout began. The board, most of whom had been nodding through quarterly earnings with the intellectual engagement of houseplints, suddenly snapped awake. One of them, Miss Haverson, a private equity lifer with cheekbones sharper than her hedge fund tactics, looked up from her tablet and said in a voice that could freeze lava, "Did you even read the final contract, Logan?" He tried to deflect. "It went through legal." "I trusted the don't finish that sentence," she said flatly, "because legal says you signed the approval memo and the amendment." Another board member, a former client-turned-investor named Telford, muttered without lifting his eyes, "We paid for the clause that protected her. And then we fired her." The words hit like a body blow. No one replied. No one could, because it was true. I wasn't just in the contract, I was the contract. The clause was never a formality, it was an anchor. I'd become the only irreplaceable thing in a firm that treated everyone like thumb drives, useful, cheap, and easily lost. They had deleted their own failsafe. And now the client was gone. In the next 24 hours, it unraveled fast. The client issued formal notice. All communications were to go through me directly. The firm's internal Slack went dark, a graveyard of deleted threads and nervous emoji replies. Rachel, the E, was reassigned to a project support role, which is HR code for wait here, and maybe we'll forget what you knew. Greg, rumor had it, requested emergency PTO. And Logan was last seen leaving HQ with his laptop under one arm and a rolled-up vision statement under the other. A man who'd just discovered vision doesn't matter if you can't read. The board stopped talking about strategy. They started talking about liability. Somebody floated the idea of reaching out to me. Someone else shut it down immediately. "She's under contract now," Haverson said, "and she doesn't owe us a thing." Which was true, because I hadn't just written the clause. I was the clause. I was the guarantee. I was the fine print that became fate. And by the time they realized it, I was already billing by the hour from a lake house with 2 screens, a signed agreement, and peace they couldn't buy back. The boardroom lights were too bright for meeting that early. Nobody spoke as they filed in, all of them looking like they'd aged 10 years overnight. No catered breakfast, no notepads, just grim silence, stale air, and the looming scent of desperation, like a conference call with bankruptcy. The only sound was the soft hum of the speakerphone and the ticking of the wall clock, a countdown to corporate judgment. Harold, the general counsel, stood at the head of the table, holding a contract like it was a murder weapon. Same battered red folder. Same page 42 dog-eared like scripture. He didn't sit, didn't blink. Just stood there while Logan fidgeted in the corner, no longer perched at the table like a visionary, but slouched in a chair that suddenly felt too big for him. Harold cleared his throat and read the clause aloud one final time, voice low and slow like a tolling bell. Key person M.A. Green. Non-substitutable without written client approval. A pause. Then he read the final line, the one they'd ignored, skimmed, underestimated. M.A. Green shall be considered irreplaceable in the context of contractual fulfillment. The word irreplaceable hung there like smoke, thick and choking. He closed the folder, looked directly at Logan. "What," he said, his voice flat and almost gentle, "have you done?" Logan tried to open his mouth but found nothing inside worth saying. His gaze flicked to the others, but no one came to save him. Not Greg, who'd been silent since his demotion was quietly filed. Not Haverson, now regarded Logan like a dried-out investment. Not even Rachel, who refused to meet his eyes. They had no leverage, no recourse, no client. The projector beeped to life. The Zoom login loaded, and there I was, clean background, crisp blazer. A breeze from the open window behind me flicked the edge of a framed certificate that said Margaret A. Green Strategic Integrity Award. I looked straight at them. No smugness, no malice. Just a soft, deliberate smile, the kind that says, "I know exactly who I am now, and you don't matter anymore." Logan leaned toward the mic, a desperation twitch hiding behind false poise. "Margaret," he started, "perhaps we could." I raised one hand. Not rude, just final. "Do I said, tilting my head slightly, "look unemployed to you?" Silence. Someone at the far end of the table actually gulped. I gave them 5 seconds of eye contact. Then I ended the call. No dramatic flourish. Just clicked the red button and turned back to my second monitor, where another client's document was waiting for review. My time was no longer theirs. It was billable, respected, and mine. Back in the boardroom, the Zoom screen froze on the last frame of me smiling, a still image that said more than any lawsuit ever could. Logan sat there, shoulders sagging, face pale and expressionless. No one moved. The board stared at him not with anger, with something worse, calculation. That cold corporate math where the numbers don't lie and leadership is nothing without results. The silence was broken by a chair creaking. Then another. Then the shuffle of papers as someone closed a folder and stood to leave. Logan didn't. He just sat there, blinking into the screen that no longer had me in it. And me, I was already on the next call, already onto the next deal, already beyond them. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.